so far.
All right, great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and thank our sponsors. We have our annual sponsors, our premier annual sponsors are TW Perry and Ferguson. And our gold annual partners are Cambria, Mid-South Building Supply, Tart Lumber, and Barron's Lumber. So we always want to thank them for all they do for us to make so many things possible. So I think it's best for us to go ahead and get started. And I will turn it over to George, and he will let you know what he's going to talk about and how he's going to handle your questions. And then he'll do a wrap up at the end. So there you go, George.
Great, good. All right, so first thing to do is just set up a little screen share. Everybody just give me a thumbs up if you've got it, if we're all on the same page. Can everybody see it? Perfect, great. So today's topic in our series is specifically exit planning is good business strategy. As Debbie alluded to, this is a interactive, let's have some fun together, jump in, ask questions, whatever that means. If you want to use the chat, fine. If you just want to raise your virtual hand, if you want to raise your hand, I'm going to ask Debbie just to kind of keep an eye on it. Just so you guys know, I've got everybody on a screen slightly over here to my left, so if I'm looking sideways, that's why. I've got the presentation in front of me. So again, ask a bunch of questions, jump in, feel free. We do have a little Q&A time set up at the end. Obviously we weren't able for, time reasons and so forth to ask all the previous presenters to join us again. But so if you've got a question about any other previous module or question or presentation, please ask it. If Debbie and I can't answer, then we'll make the commitment to you that we'll come back and get with that presenter, get the answer, and either have them reach out directly or hopefully answer it for us, and then we can send it around to the whole group electronically. So is that fair for everybody? Are we good? Everybody on board from there? Again, just quick thumbs up or whatever. That's great. So good. All right. So quick sort of, all right, who is George? Well, let me start with the fact that George went through David Merrick's CR class. So I've known Dave since 2005. That's more unfortunate for Dave than it is for me. But regardless, so I am a current pro member. I did grow up in a family business, so I understand a lot of those trials and tribulations, the sort of exit planning, succession planning that's involved with that. But also just running a family business obviously has its unique dynamics. Undergrad from Virginia, and then I do hold a master's in construction management and manufacturing technology from Colorado State. So some of the things we're going to talk about today, I'll say, were really introduced to me, frankly, at BOA when I joined BOA in 2003, and they come from a business operating system called Scaling Up. Subsequently, I was there for almost 14 years and held many different positions within our industry at BOA. When I successfully exited BOA, I actually ended up owning part of BOA when I successfully exited in 2017. I used a different business operating system called EOS, which is the entrepreneurial operating system. It's popularized by a book, Traction, many people have heard of, from Gino Wickman. And I was a COO at a landscaping business here in Northern Virginia. And during that time implementing EOS, we grew the firm 130% on the top line, but more importantly was focused on the bottom line, increased the net profit 351% in 2 years. So with those two experiences of using Scaling Up and EOS, I decided that that's what I'm really passionate about, is helping people, coaching people, teaching people. And frankly, that's a little bit of the why I'm here today. So I have been a professional EOS implementer. I left EOS in 2021 and took my practice to Pinnacle Business Guides. But we are, a business operating system that are helping entrepreneurs and leadership teams, get more than you ever thought from your business by really implementing a simple set of tools and concepts and driving discipline and accountability execution throughout your business. It also came to my attention in 2021, one of my clients that I was helping them grow sort of said, oh, by the way, I'm also thinking about exiting. What do you know about exit planning? And frankly, was caught a little flat-footed. I said, I don't really know that much. When I exited BOA, it was pretty easy. We sort of had a buy-share agreement. And, so I don't know that much about it. So I went off and I became a certified exit planning advisor, or SEPA, as you can see down there in the bold, which is the reason why we're all here today, to sort of talk about exit planning and strategies for exit planning and sort of thing. And then as the last bullet point says that, I'm all about continual self-improvement, pushing myself, learning in things. And that's where, again, when my client came to me and said, hey, what do you know about this? I was like, I don't know anything. And so that's what I went out and got the designation and started learning about exit planning. And so super excited to share with you today what I know about that and see if we can help you all, formulate your plans around that. So with that, my goal today is just to have a little conversation around, basically exit planning and, good business strategy. So first thing I want you to understand is exit planning is a strategic business tool. It is part of the strategy that we use when we're talking about, things like vision. Okay, where are we going? Well, that's frankly super sexy and easy. The strategy part of it, of okay, how are we going to get there, is the more difficult part. So exit planning is a strategic business tool. It's about the future of you, your family, and your business. But the real key is that we're trying to maximize value today. That is, it's about wealth creation and about driving that value today, which then subsequently allows us to transfer that business value to you personally, away from the business, helping you achieve your personal, financial objectives with, the business objectives, if they are, passing it along, continuing to second, third, fourth generation, that sort of thing, ensuring that you as the owner are financially prepared and that there's also a plan for what's next, right? So those are the kind of the takeaways for today. Does anybody have any questions or any thoughts on that or any input before we move on? And again, I'll just check, and looks like we're good to go. All right, so couple key words, right? This is just definitions, if you will. I want you to think like exit planning is basically the whole pie, and succession planning is just a slice of the pie or a bit of the pie, right? So these terms do get used interchangeably, but they're not really designed to be used interchangeably, right? So again, exit planning is the identifying and executing of this whole plan by the organization, the leadership team. The succession planning is if we're going to transfer that power, of the leadership team. So they really do sort of mean two different things. Again, just a quick question, everybody. Does it make sense to everybody? Thumbs up or whatever. We're good to go. Awesome. All right.
Or I have a question. Wait. I have a question. Could you use the same terminology? I mean, in theory, I understand it where it's identifying and executing the transfer as the exit planning. But then you still say the same thing in terms of succession is, again, transferring the power. I'm assuming that succession is more to somebody that's related versus just exit planning.
So yeah, so exit planning is about the transfer of the strategy and the ownership of the company. The succession planning is about transferring the power. And to your point, Cindy, the succession planning typically deals with a internal management takeover, maybe even a buyout internally from the management team, or family succession planning. So it's the exit planning is talking about, shares and the power and ownership. The succession planning component of it is talking about the transferring of the power of the leadership team. Is that helpful? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Good. All right, so again, just those were just kind of some definitions here, but why, in essence, why do we want to do exit planning, right? And the reason that we want to do exit planning are for all of the bullet points on the on the screen. The idea here is just like our industry, the more we plan, the more we prepare, the smoother the transition happens, right? And that's what we're sort of looking for, is a smooth transition, which ultimately, drives value and allows that value to be transferred from one entity to the other. So if we have an exit plan and if we've executed on that exit plan, your business will be more valuable than it potentially is today, depending on, what position it's in, right? And so, I really just want you to think about this as, value creation sort of in the future, right? This whole idea that exit planning is good business strategy. It's about, creating value for the future and then being able to harvest that value, at a later date when we decide to exit on our terms. So, let me, sort of break this down for us in the sense of, the strategic value. It's pretty simple math, right? So I want you to think, of this as two things. On the left side of this equation, this is just the numbers, just the math side of it, right? So these are all the things that we get from our accountants. These are just reports, right? And so, these are all in the rear view mirror, right? This is EBITDA, this is net profit, things like that. The things in the middle are the multipliers. These are the intangibles that are in your business. These are some of the things that are the softer side of things. So what I want to do is dig into this equation for you for a little bit, help you understand it a little bit more. And so the first one is, we'll just take the left side of the equation, the cash, the sales, the EBITDA, if you will. And so that's as I mentioned, the left side of that equation is it's just math, right? It's just numbers. Again, it's coming out of the accounting reports. As I mentioned earlier, it's EBITDA. At some point, sometimes EBITDA gets recasted, for reasons that are, if owners in our industry are taking discretionary, costs out of the business, as it mentions here, sort of second homes, boats, cars, travels, bonuses, that sort of thing. So the point is that drives down your net profit. It drives down your EBITDA. If that's discretionary, meaning that the future entity isn't going to take those costs or those expenses out of the business, we actually add them back in so that it increases the EBITDA, because the future owner isn't really going to do those things. So again, we're trying to normalize it as if it's a normal functioning business, not one that we've created for lifestyle businesses, etc. We're also going to normalize it for things like salaries and rent. A lot of us as owners take a salary that frankly is too small, right? It's not fair market value. If you really looked at all the things that we do at times as owners, meaning the primary salesperson, the general manager or COO, that sort of thing. And so buyers will look at that and say, okay, if you're leaving, I have to replace you with 2 or 3 people. And they'll add that number back into your overhead, again, to normalize or recast that EBITDA. So it goes in both directions, right? So if you're not paying yourself a fair salary, realize that anybody who's buying you is going to look at that and realize that they have to replace you, and it will drive down your EBITDA. Any other any questions here, I should say, but before we sort of move on from this page, does this make sense? And again, I'm focused on the left side of that initial equation that I was sharing with you before. Makes sense? All right. Doesn't look like any questions. So the middle side of that equation, if you will, the intangibles are what we call a range of values. And so once we have EBITDA, we multiply it by a multiplier, right? And that range of values is where we as business owners can really impact the value of our business. Because frankly, the EBITDA numbers and things like that, it's water under the bridge, right? Accounting reports are rear view facing, the numbers are the numbers. And besides the recasting that I was referring to, you can't change the EBITDA in your business. And so if you decide to sell today, what the average buyer is going to do is look at your last 3-year P&L, and those numbers are, cast in die, if you will. Where we can impact our business significantly is in this range of values. And so, as I mentioned, the market sets the range of values. So in our industry, I've heard a range of values anywhere between 2 to 8. Frankly, I think that's a pretty big range. And I think that more realistically, it's probably about a 2.5 to 4 time range of value in our business. There are professionals out there that will help us actually identify those numbers and really understand that range of value. The point that I'm trying to make is that you cannot control the range of value. The market sets that. So if we were a tech company, it's normal for tech companies to trade 10 to 30 time range of value. Our industry just doesn't have that range of value. So the point I'm trying to make is that within the range of value of our industry, where you trade, whether it's at the bottom end or the top end, you are directly responsible and can impact. And so again, this is simple math. It's just a multiplier. We want to affect both sides of the equation as best we can, right? We want to increase our EBITDA so it gets multiplied by a higher range of value. And as you can see, it just becomes compounding for us in that regard. So when I talk about the range of values, I talk about the intangibles. These are the things that I want to spend some time on today. So the traditional accounting system, that's the T side of it, the tangible assets. This is where we're just going to look at 3 years of P&L data. We're going to do an average, and there's nothing that we can do about that because it's all frankly in the rearview mirror. What we can make a huge impact pretty quickly in your business are the intangible things. And that's what's really going to drive value acceleration, value creation within your business. And so what I'm going to do now is take us through those 4 C's, take us through those 4 intangibles, and help you all understand, okay, what levers can you pull in the very short term to increase the value of your business pretty quickly, pretty exponentially, in addition to always focusing on EBITDA, right? Things like that. So the first C is the human capital. You can see the 4 C's are just referred to capital. So the first one is the human capital side of your business, right? So Jim Collins taught us in Good to Great, right people, right seats, right? So right people are people who fit your culture like a glove, right? They demonstrate your core values. The core values, as a reminder, are the guiding principles for your organization. These are the behaviors, the traits, the attributes that you must demonstrate as one of our employees, one of our colleagues, to become a right person, right? So that's the cultural side of our business. The right seats is, are they doing their job? Are they in the right seat? Do they have the talent, the experience, the knowledge, the resources, to do their job within our organization? Do they understand the roles and responsibilities that are required of them when they're sitting in those seats, right? So the more that we can increase our human capital, we can start moving the needle on one of those 4 intangibles, right? So human capital just is directly as a relationship to the quality of your leadership team and your workforce. That's what human capital is. Any questions there? Right. All right, so the customer capital, right? This is who we do business with, right? This is our target market, right? Sort of really knowing who our customers are. And this is, talking about, okay, what's our net promoter score, for example, is a measurement of our customer capital, right? How likely on a scale of 1 to 10 are our customers, our clients, willing to refer us? So a net promoter score, as an example, is just one example that we use to measure customer capital, which of course in our business is a leading indicator to referrals, right? The other way that in our industry, when we go through the exit process, is how many of our clients are repeat clients, right? I like to refer to them as serial remodelers, right? How many of our clients are coming back to us, time and time again? How many of those clients are referring family and friends, right? Those are all things that we can use to measure, our customer capital and demonstrate to our potential buyer that we have real value in that department, if you will, right? And as we all know, by the way, repeat clients are easier to sell to. Typically, they have higher profit. We know their nuances, their quirks. We can build that into our budgets, our contract documents, things like that. And frankly, it's just easier to do business with those people. So, any questions on the customer capital side of it? Anybody good there? Yeah, Keith, go ahead.
Thanks, George. So I have a question about this particular point of view that you're presenting, because I've heard that a large percentage of repeat and referral business in sort of a single owner, the owner is the leader, the salesperson, et cetera, is actually a negative, and that you should be working to get your new customer base sort of at 50-60% of your new customers, because we do have repeats, but you should be working to get 50 to 60% of your new contracts coming from people who do not know you.
Yeah, from my opinion, I think we're actually saying the exact same thing. I think the point is that if you can't demonstrate to a future buyer that you have zero repeat clients or zero referrals from them, that's going to be a leading indicator to a buyer that you've got a brand problem, a quality problem, that sort of thing. So when I say, driving on referrals and things, I'm thinking like 30 to 50% of your revenue or your customer base is coming from those serial remodelers or those direct referrals. So when you say 50 or 60% the other way, I think we're actually saying the exact same thing. It's just the number can't be zero, because then it's like we're literally fishing every time for a brand new fish.
Right. Agreed. I'm just trying to get out of kind of a 80 to 90% repeat and referral model.
Yeah, I think in your particular case, and I'd love to sort of dig in and have a conversation, but I personally, so I'll make it, very clear from a personal perspective, I don't see that as a bad thing, and I wouldn't be afraid of it if I was a buyer. But that being said, I do believe that there's a perspective out there in the marketplace that could be scary, from you. I mean, to me, it just says you've got brand loyalty. You don't have to spend a lot on marketing. I mean, the right leads are coming through the door. That sort of thing. The only other way that I would kick this in is let's just say hypothetically, Keith, and I'm just pulling numbers randomly. If your organization was, had top line revenue on average for the last 3 years of 4 million, and you had one client or one family that was doing $1 million a year in those 3 years, I would then discount that, because you've now got one client you're so dependent on that's making up, typically when that number gets to be about 15-20%, that starts getting to be a red flag. And certainly I've heard anything that's over 20% from one customer continually is a problem when it comes to that multiplier and where you would trade within the marketplace.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Great. Good question. Good stuff.
George, can I ask a little different question? I know I'm not a remodeler, but I deal with them a lot. And so I have probably 3 remodelers that I work with on a regular basis that bring in the majority of my revenue. And we've been working over the last few years to bring in individual homeowners on the design end of it, and then be able to parcel it out to those remodelers. But does that actually represent a negative to the company, even though I've had relationships with those contractors for years?
I think mathematically, the answer is yes. And let's just take hypothetically, Cindy, you've got 3 remodelers. Each one of them are generating about 30% of your revenue. Your homeowner base is about 10% of your revenue. I'm just picking out numbers just to, but
Yeah.
But if you look at the outside, if an outside designer, right? I mean, another architect, designer, whomever was looking to buy your organization, they would say, man, if one of those people doesn't come with me, if I don't jive with one of them, if I can't continue to business, then 30% of what I'm buying just walked out the door. That's going to cause a little heartburn. Now, I think you can overcome that. Again, this becomes a relationship type sell where you go and introduce the future buyer to those 3 major clients of yours and say, guys, as you know, I've been trying to transition out of the business. I'd like to introduce you to so-and-so, spend some time and try to build that rapport and that relationship so that you don't get so discounted as you go through the process. I think that could be a very healthy way to overcome that specific, very large percentage in your market base.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yep. Good stuff. All right, so we talk about structural capital, right? Think about the inside, think about your business, right? It's not physical, the physical structure that you're building is held up from, right? But the question here is right, can you really sell your playbook, right? Like, do you have something that allows you to, execute scalable, allows you to basically execute the same way day in and day out, right? So is it scalable? Is it reproducible? Do you have the infrastructure and, the structural capital to scale up very quickly? Meaning you've got all the plays in your playbook built, you've got your processes built, and to scale down very quickly, right? So that if you can demonstrate that to a buyer, hey, let me show you what I call an accountability chart, what you all would refer to as an org chart. Let me show you an org chart of how this business is going to scale up 20%. And let me show you another one that if this business needs to scale down to 80%, and here's the actual names in place, these are your A players that you're going to keep. You have built some structural capital so that buyer knows, okay, look, you're thinking to the future and you understand what's going to happen. Also being able to demonstrate to a potential buyer, what does my company look like at 75% of revenue from last year, right? So here's what I'm going to do to get down there. This is what I'm going to do to cut overhead. These are the first choices I'm going to make. These are the people that are no longer going to be with me. These are the programs that I might be reducing from. So again, they want to know that you're not only just thinking upside, that there's a downside or the other side of the coin that they then could execute on very quickly if they needed to, right? So, part of these are just really hard questions and that you just need to be able to answer. I certainly hope that all of us are always in a position that our companies are always growing. But I do, when I'm working with companies, I do work with them to build, forecasting and modeling for the future, larger, but also in reverse. I call it a reverse accountability chart, so that if they need to execute, the decisions have already been made. And again, they don't have to execute with any drama, right? And so the goal is let's build this plan, let's lock it away in a safe, and hopefully we never have to use it. But as many of us know on this call, right, 2008 happens, COVID happens, right? Things happen, and we've got to be able to scale our business up and down, and that's what a lot of this structural capital is talking about, right? Do you have documentation? Do you have the years of data that supports whatever claims you're making, that sort of thing? Do you have the equipment, the machinery, the property to continue to support this business? Have you trademarked something? Do you own something, from an intellectual standpoint, that adds business, value to your business? So that's on the structural side of it. And again, it's really about processes. I call them playbooks. What plays do we run? How do we run them? Does the left hand know what the right hand is doing when I hand off a document from my sales and my design team, pre-construction manager, whatever word you use in your business, to my production team? How does that handoff happen? How is that meeting? What does that look like? Who runs that meeting? If you can show those things to a potential buyer, your value is significantly increased compared to somebody that's just, gets it done by brute force, right? Because we've all been there. We've all run businesses on brute force, and it works until it doesn't, right? When we run out of time, energy, somebody gets sick, we get overloaded, we get busy, that sort of thing. So any questions on the structural capital side of things? All right. So the last one is the social capital, right? This is just really your brand in the marketplace, right? Think about the Apple store. We all know what we're going to get when we walk in there, right? Is our, are we demonstrating continuity? Are our employees, our colleagues, presenting themselves in the cultural manner in which we want to, we want them to present themselves, right? Are we doing things outside of the community, right? Are we getting involved in community events? That sort of thing. So does our brand, does it live beyond just us and certainly our team, right? So again, just making sure that we're interacting with the community. And as you guys can imagine, for certain organizations, this is a pretty high priority. Typically in our industry, this isn't the most important capital, but you still want to be able to demonstrate something, right? And that we are doing volunteerism. We care about the community that we work in, right? It's for the greater good of the community, that sort of thing. Even those, smaller sort of, less effort required items still have value when they go to sell the business, right? The point is to not to have zero, right? It's if that's the case, then you sort of get dinged on one of the 4 major C's, and that just, again, it hurts your multiplier. So any questions here on the social capital side of things? Good. All right. So moving on a little bit, right? We're talking about sort of, good business strategy here, right? So we part of this is as part of this exit planning process is we need to integrate your goals. If you're the owner, your owner's goals and the business objectives, right? So the business objective is to maximize that transferable value, right? To achieve the highest multiple possible at the time of sale. On the financial side, it's ensuring that the owner is financially prepared, right? That you have met with a personal finance person, that your personal financing is prepared and that your personal finance planning is done. And then personally, what's next in for you? What are you going to do in life after the business, right? Developing a life plan with your partner, your family, whatever it is. And I'll circle back to why that's so important here in a little bit. But that's, some of the objectives that we're trying to address here. Exit planning is also addressing, how attractive is your business to sell, right? How prepared is it ready to be sold, right? Are the taxes filed? Do we have all the tax receipts? That sort of thing, right? That's the readiness side of it. Excuse me, that is an example, the readiness side of it. But the attractiveness side of it is, what is the brand? What is the EBITDA? That sort of thing, right? So there's a difference between being attractive, looking like you're ready to sell, versus being ready to sell, which is having all the documentation in order, the insurances, the transfer plans, the sort of thing. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the personal readiness. Are you ready to exit this business? What's next for you in your business? And again, I'll circle back to that here in a couple slides of why that is so important. So the next thing that I want to talk about is that exit planning does address, the wealth gap, right? So the wealth gap is the amount of money that needs to be harvested from the business to meet your goals, right? So we have to quantify how much money do you need to live the life that you want to live for as long as we think you're going to live, and that's going to give us a number, right? And so when we talk about the wealth gap, this is the following equation, right? And I'll leave it here a couple minutes. I'll let you walk through it. Those of you who want to, grab a screen share. And I think, Debbie, we're sending this out anyways afterwards. So, it's certainly, can be done. Is that right?
We're sending the recordings, but we can certainly send any of the PowerPoints that.
Yeah, and I can share this if somebody wants it, that sort of thing. Again, feel free to grab a screen share, photo, whatever. But, it's pretty simple math, right? What's the value of the business? What do we think it's going to sell for? Assuming you have 100% ownership. Obviously, if you have a partner, it's just split 50-50, right? What's your current net worth without the business? And I will tell you that most small business owners typically 80 to 90% of their wealth is locked up in the business. So what is your owner's wealth without the business? That then, of course, actually answers the question, what is the owner's wealth? What is the true owner's wealth? And then we need to quantify that with your financial retirement goals, whatever word you want to use. If you don't like retirement, that's fine. Whatever the next stage of your life is, what are your goals, right? What do you need to live? How much money do you need to live in the life that you want to live? And how long do we think that you're going to be living in that life, right? What is that number? And then subtracting that from the C, which is the owner's wealth, that identifies the owner's wealth goal. So pretty simple mathematical equation here. Frankly, by me talking, I've probably convoluted it more than it needed to be. Anybody have any questions here? Everybody good? All right, so we're gonna jump on, right? So there's a couple different profit and value gaps as we're looking at this as exit planning advisors, right? So one is the profit gap, right? So what is your profit margin versus best in class profit margin for your industry, right? Because this impacts EBITDA, this impacts the bottom line pretty significantly if there's a profit gap in your business, right? And not only do we want to look at best in class, a savvy buyer is going to dig into your books and figure out, okay, you're selling jobs for 37.5% GP, but you're constantly producing them at 32%. They are going to start looking more focused on the 32% than obviously what you're selling for, and they're going to ding you in this profit gap equation. So not only is it just about your own profit margin versus best in class. So again, if you're consistently selling for 37.5%, but the buyer has a perception that our industry's best in class margin is 40%, there's a profit gap, and they're going to want to know why, and they're going to dig into that, and they're going to use that to devalue your business, right? To present you an offer that is less than, and they're going to use this profit gap idea or concept as one of the reasons that they're not offering you as much money as you think your business is worth. And then, of course, the value gap, right? The value gap is what is the value of your business today, and what could it be if we work together to get it best in class operationally, but also increasing those other 4 C's, right? Increasing the capital of your business. And just so you all know, right, the average value gap is about 27%, right? So, right, when potential clients come to certified exit planning advisors and we do these evaluations, we can actually identify typically on average a 27% value gap. So, just operational efficiency of what you're currently doing. Again, social capital, human capital, the 4 C's in relationship to where you could be trading, that gap is about 27%. So any questions there? Does everybody understand those 2 concepts? Go ahead, Keith.
So I just want to make sure I got it clear, because I heard you referring essentially to what gross profit margin or gross margin. Isn't it going to get ultimately based on net profit? I mean, because in other words, you could price your projects in such a way that you're targeting 50% gross margin, or you're targeting 20% gross margin, but that 20% is everything that's left over for the owner. Like, that's a pricing strategy. Isn't, at the end of the day, the net the real multiplier?
Yeah, and I appreciate you calling me out on that. In this particular case, from an exit standpoint, they're going to actually look at both. So I really appreciate you calling out both, because they're going to wonder, okay, why are you in the example I was providing? Why are you selling at 2.5% less? Which, to your point, Keith, it might be a business strategy. Hey guys, I know the marketplace, and I know all of my really good competitors are selling at 40. I've just made a decision to operate at 37.5. But at the end of the day, I end up with 12% net profit. And my understanding is most of my competitors are ending up at 8% net profit. So it just does become a pricing strategy. And as long as you can explain it to them and it's intentional, and I think, as you said, Keith, most importantly is the net profit. And they're going to compare both of those profits, gross and net. So I really appreciate you, jumping on that and asking for that clarification, because it's super important.
So just to keep it going a little bit, it sounds like kind of getting your ownership ready to sell, going back to that readiness, like and I'll just be specific to me. I kind of need to get myself out of, my goal is no longer that I'm extracting X% of the business. So, the Remodelers Advantage strategy was 10 and 10. Nobody ever hit 10 and 10. So, a couple people, 16, 17 were the top performers, meaning owner comp. Mine unfortunately isn't quite at that number, but it is over, it's a few points over 10. But it sounds like from a mindset standpoint, I've got to get out of that mindset, that's almost not important once you start going into these analyses. Is that accurate?
So I think I heard what you said, which is that RA has a methodology, which, by the way, I actually sort of agree with, in the sense of, you as an owner have taken risk. You're entitled.
I'm not in RA anymore, but I was for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, but the key here is for you to make sure that you have a line item in your P&L that says, okay, Keith had a salary of X, but Keith took dividends of Y, and that's why our EBITDA is much lower, because they're going to recast that and put that back in and say, okay, wait, if you didn't take owner's dividends, then your EBITDA is back up to that 16, 17%, something like that. And they're going to use that as the multiplier. So that's why that word recasting and the concept of recasting is so important, because that's what the future owner can start realizing that they can take out of the business in the future, right? That you're not going to continue to take that out after you leave.
Right.
So as long as it's very clear in the books and the way you've taken those dividends, that we can isolate that number, push it back into the P&L and recast your EBITDA, then there's nothing wrong with what you're doing.
Okay. We have an owner's benefit section in overhead.
Right. And I've seen stuff, and you guys all know it from RA and colleagues of ours. I mean, crazy stuff. Wait, own a second house, a boat, whatever the company pays for it. Okay, fine. I'm not telling you there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying, let's just make sure that we know line item by line item, penny by penny, what goes back into that, owner's benefits, if you will, line item, because that's essentially discretionary and needs to get added back in, for future, for that resale or for that sale for that math, if you will. So makes sense for everybody? Are we good? Great conversation, Keith. Good job. So the idea here is, and I kept talking about you personally, and I said, hey, I'm going to circle back to this. This is the reason why it's so important for you to have a plan, for 2 reasons. One is that 50% of all business exits in small entrepreneurial businesses are from these 5 Ds. And obviously you guys can read through this and let this, and understand what this is. But the point is that are you really ready, right? So you need to be ready at any given time for you to exit the business, because frankly, 50% of the time it's not voluntary and it's not on your timeline. And that's why getting it ready so quickly and being ready at any given time is so important, right? I like to think of this like all of us who got roped into some sort of volunteer, position, right? Our number one job once we get into a volunteer seat is to find our replacement, right? So that's how important this is to make sure that, we are starting to prepare for this, and that our loved ones, our other team members are not left with the business and the business being disorganized, if something dramatic happens to us, on this slide, that sort of thing. So the other reason why you need a plan, and the other reason why you need to answer the question, okay, am I ready? What am I going to do? And where the slides were really impressing upon, what do you want when you leave this business? The reason is that we know at SEPA, right, again, as a certified exit planning advisor, is that 75% of all owners profoundly regret selling their business within the first year because they didn't have a plan. They didn't know what they were going to do next, right? So many of us are just like, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to go play with my grandkids. Well, that just is not as fulfilling as owning our business, the adrenaline shots that we get of going out and selling design agreements, getting projects across the finish line, dealing with new hires. As much as we all pulling our hair out with all those things, the reality is that, a lot of us get adrenaline, it's all dopamine, and it's very hard to replace. So it becomes a very sort of important mental health conversation of what are you going to do? What are you going to replace those activities with? What are you going to do with the energy that you have every day that you bring to work? And again, I know many of us are like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I just want to leave. I want to get out of this. I don't disagree with you. I'm just telling you that you're bringing a certain amount of energy every day to work. And on Monday morning, the first week that you don't own a business, you got a lot of nervous energy, and you better figure out where to channel it pretty quickly, or as the statistic says, you're going to become one of the 75% who's just really regretting letting go of the business. So any questions there? All right.
For the death side of it, do you recommend having like key man insurance? Death or disability?
Yeah, I mean, obviously key man insurance is super.
Topic.
Yeah, I mean, that stuff is super helpful, in that regard. It's more about having the plan. Okay, if Keith is removed from the business tomorrow, what's the leadership team going to do? What's going to happen, right? Sort of thing. Is this business going to try to continue to carry on? Or are we just going to have an auction and just sell off everything, and it's really the end of the business, right? So that key man insurance is super helpful in the sense that it will give the organization a very quick cash flow, right? An adrenaline shot of cash to help them get through, several months of, sort of planning and so forth. It'll buy them some time to bring some outside advisors in, to hire some consultants to help build the plan. But at the end of the day, having a plan of, okay, what's going to happen with the transition? Who's going to own this thing if something happens to me overnight? That type of the planning is what we're really pushing for here. Yeah. All right. So again, this is, it's a little bit of a slide of just sort of saying, really what's the plan, right? So the idea of exit planning is just combining all of these things into a clear, simple strategy that really we can present to somebody else that's protecting the future of you and your family, and the business, right? Again, it's a business tool because it helps you get laser focused. Hey, if I'm going to exit the business 5 years from now, what do I need to start doing? I need to start getting more human capital. I need a general manager. I need to create EBITDA, those sort of things. And so that, exit planning is good business strategy because it's forcing you to identify a goal and frankly staying laser focused on that goal so that you can execute within the time frame that you want. And so it's all about value acceleration. It's all about starting sooner rather than later, right? And so once we understand that, then it just becomes about relentless execution, right? So when we start talking about relentless execution is once we have that vision, once we have that goal, that exit planning goal, we need to start building the strategy around it, right? So, and then it just, as I said on this slide, is about execution, right? Specific set of behaviors and techniques that companies need to basically have a competitive advantage. I can't impress upon you enough that exit planning, it's just a business strategy. It's about getting the vision, the alignment, the accountability, the rhythm, right? And so ultimately, what I do as a Pinnacle business guide, which is a business operating system, is basically customizing that plan for your company, for your industry, and helping you achieve those goals, right? And sort of really working with you and your leadership team of, okay, when does so-and-so want to leave? How are we going to exit? What does that exit look like? What do we need to accomplish between now and then to drive the value to set this organization up for success once this person leaves? And, you know, really identifying that strategic vision and execution plan, and then getting basically, you know, relentless about it, you know, driven on, you know, in a 90-day time period, every 90 days, okay, what were the goals and priorities for the last 90 days? Did we accomplish them? What are the annual goals? That sort of thing, and driving to that end result, right? And so it's all really about value, you know, creation, right? It's just part of the development of the strategic plan. It's frankly keeping a lot of owners on track, right? So many of us get distracted by things. We want things to happen more quickly than they possibly can in most cases. And so this sort of, you know, business operating system, this relentless execution just keeps us laser focused, right? It's the eye on the prize, right? If I'm going to get out of here in 3 to 5 years from now, and I'm going to get out of here profitably, what do I need to do? So part of this process is really sort of working with an exit advisor. Let's figure out where the risk is. And the first thing is, let's de-risk the business, right? Let's get rid of the liabilities. Let's bring the insurance in, as Keith was kind of just alluding to. Let's you know, de-risk everything. Let's run a risk analysis. Let's protect that stuff. That's the first priority. Then the second one is build systems around protecting that wealth that we already have so we don't lose it. And then we'll start building on top of that. So again, we can increase the multiplier. And so that's the prioritization of the process of wealth creation. Any questions here? So
How long is realistic to have it ready?
yeah, it's a great question, and frankly, it all really depends on the you know, the condition of your existing business and your existing leadership team and what's been documented from processes and so forth. It is bare minimum of a year. I mean, in my opinion, it's a bare minimum of a year. You know, if I had my perfect sort of execution about it, it would be 3 to 5 years. Frankly, I think it's about 2. It's somewhere in there. You know, in that regard. And the reason I say 3 to 5 is because I've worked with owners, you know, leadership teams who have come to me and said, I want to exit. And we get the business running so great that they're like, maybe I don't want to actually exit. I just want to work a day and a half a week and let the leadership team run it. And so as opposed to getting you out, we actually coach you up into a different role within the business, right? So as opposed to coaching you out, which is sales or selling of the business, we actually coach you up into a different role. We let somebody else come up and take over the day-to-day operations of the business, and you're able to sort of go off and do the things that you want to do, but yet still retain ownership of the business and the value that you've created in dividends and things like that. So quick sort of, you know, coming into home stretch here, just, you know, my portion was about an hour, but I've got a couple more slides here. So understanding the exit options, right? So a lot of owners don't understand, you know, the transition or exit options. Most owners, or I shouldn't say most, 49%, which of course is not most, about half of owners don't have an exit plan at all. And so, you know, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the type of exit options. And so there's inside, meaning there's inside of your business ways to exit and outside. And so we're just going to sort of run through this real quick, right? So one of the inside options is intergenerational transfer, right? This is literally just transferring the stock to your heirs. Typically it's children, but not always, right? It could be family members, sort of things like that. 50%, we know statistically 50% of business owners want to exercise this option, but only 30% actually are able to do so, right? So having this exit planning conversation, bringing family members in ahead of time, talking to them about it, getting them on the same page is absolutely critical to the success of the business, right? And, you know, using private equity to, buy out the older generations, give them a cash influence or a cash, influx, but allowing the younger generation to manage the business is a way to do that type of thing, right? And private equity, by the way, is sometimes as simple as your heirs going to the bank and basically loaning against the business, the future value of the business or the assets of the business. And you're basically taking, in essence, becomes a cash out type conversation, right? There are success rates that are sort of proven over time, right? So second generation businesses only last 30% of the time. Out of those second generation businesses, only 12% actually make it to the third generation, and only 3% make it to the fourth generation. And all I have to do is mention the word Vanderbilt, and most of you will know exactly what I'm talking about. So you have to be very aware of this succession plan and the success rate of transferring it down to multiple generations. And the reason being, specifically in our industry, and it's a lot of industries, but in ours, is it takes a lot of passion and a lot of grit to do what you all do as business owners. And your children just may not want to do that, period. It doesn't mean they're right, doesn't mean that they're wrong. They just don't want to do it, and that's fine. Don't force this on them if they don't want it. If they're not as passionate about this business and the craziness that comes with it, with homeowners and subs and vendors and trades and, supply chain and stuff, if they don't have that passion that you had, it will not succeed. So these are the inside options. And the last comment I'll make here is that a lot of our children, mine included, they want the sort of financial freedom and financial success we've created. They don't really understand the work that was put in, because a lot of that work was put in while they were babies, and before. And so they just don't understand how hard it is to take the business and move it forward. They're only seeing the back end results, and they tend to focus on that and not the hard work that's there. So that's just one of the inside options. There's three others. So ultimately there's 4 inside options. One is a management buyer, right? Where, selling to a management team. BOA does a lot of this, where basically, parts of the business are sold to certain key members of the management team. That's how I ended up owning part of BOA. They'll sell to partners, in a buy-sell agreement, or most of us are familiar with an ESOP, right? Where we can, transfer over to the employees through an ESOP. So those are the 4 inside buying options, if you will. And then we'll just do a quick run through on the outside options. Selling to a third party, pretty self-explanatory. An orderly liquidation, which is actually when the owner decides to liquidate the business and go through it. So technically there's 2 types of liquidation. One is an orderly liquidation, and one is in essence a forced liquidation. That comes about a lot of times, Keith, as we were talking earlier, like in the death, right? Somebody comes in and they just basically just literally take the business to auction and are just selling the assets. This happens a lot, by the way, in towing companies, manufacturing companies, where they've got CNC machines, things like that, where they don't want to actually sell the business, that the individual sum is, some of the parts are greater than the value as the whole, right? So sort of thing. So that's an orderly liquidation. And then, a recap is really basically where you're just turning, the balance sheet and finding new ways to fund the balance sheet. This is bringing in an equity event, investor, a lender. And in these cases, you can sell a minority or a majority of the organization. So this is just kind of a quick overview of your options. Just because a lot of owners don't really understand their options, I wanted to kind of talk about it briefly and at least just expose you to the different options, and then we can go from there. So again, quick recap, right, is that, what we're trying to accomplish today is just sort of helping you understand that this is a business tool, and it's not about just deciding that tomorrow morning you want to sell. You are not going to get the maximum value of your business as if you sort of go through this type of exit planning and really sort of prepare the business to move on in addition to figuring out your own personal financial objectives, and you also building your own life plan or what's next plan, whatever you want to call it, right? But the real key here is that, you know, the really super wise owner is always ready to sell, is always ready to exit, because as I showed you a slide from the 5 Ds, 50% of the time, we're not actually making the decisions. There's an outside force that is actually making that decision for us. And so we want to be ready at any given time, having the documents in order, letting people know, you know, where to find all of that stuff, right? Just being ready helps us, you know, to make that decision. And ultimately, if we're ready to sell at any given time, we are in control of our own destiny, right? We get to decide when we're going to sell. So that's my wrap up. You know, I'll certainly open it up for any questions or anything. And as I said at the beginning, you know, there were other presenters as part of this series. If you've got any questions for them, certainly, you know, share them with us. If Debbie and I don't know or don't think we know, then we'll write them down and we'll circle back to you. But at this point, Debbie, I'm going to kind of hand it back to you and, you know, open up the floor to everybody else.
All right, thank you very much. That was interesting to me, and I haven't been on these workshops, so that was great. Yeah, if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat, you can raise your hand, you can send them to me, whatever, because this has been a 3-phase part series. Maybe there's a recording that you haven't looked at yet that you missed. So anything at all that comes up, we're certainly happy to connect you to whoever that panel person was or the person that presented a particular part. Do you all have any questions now?
Debbie,
I haven't paid attention. Where are the recordings?
Angela will be pulling those down and we'll be sending them out to you all.
So the previous ones have already been sent, so I'll find them somewhere in my email.
I don't think she sent them. I got the impression earlier today that she said we'd be sending them all out. Is that, remember that what she said, George? She was on here just when she was on here earlier.
The first one
Whichever
was
way,
sent out.
you will get them. I'm sorry.
The first one was sent out,
It's the first one. Okay.
or at least she sent it to me, Cindy.
Okay.
I'll make sure that all of them get sent out to all of you. How about that? And
Cindy,
then
there was a small additional fee just for you to get the link.
Wouldn't surprise me, I can tell you.
and then I'm going to see if any of the presenters want to share their PowerPoints, and we'll get those to you as well. And contact information for each of the presenters. So if you have a direct question, you want to do that, then you can, or you want to hire them for their services, et cetera, then you'll have that as well. So making notes here. Yeah, so posted on YouTube. Yeah, that's where we house the recordings. I just wasn't sure if which one she's pulled down yet. So yeah.
So I have a dumb question. If they're posted on YouTube, is anybody watching them? Like, what was the value of what we paid for them then?
You're asking me a question that I don't know. It would not be on there for public if that's the case. So I don't know. Like
Well,
I
if
said,
I'm gonna be
my
charged
personal-
extra fees, you know, to get the link,
absolutely,
you know, according to George.
Right.
No, absolutely. It should not be on there publicly. So I'll
No,
check.
I think, I mean, obviously, Cindy, in all seriousness, it's a private link, but yeah, but we'll only charge you $10 per character to send that link over to you. So it's a bargain.
I haven't been involved in these, but yeah, I'm sure it's private. But
The real
That's-
value is in all of our great interaction with each other.
Oh, definitely.
And, you know, people that watch it on YouTube, they're just not going to get that.
Well, they're certainly not going to understand the horrific humor that comes out of this group. So.
Dave, don't you have any questions?
Dave always has questions.
Well, I would like, you know, just to offer a closing comment. This has been very helpful. Addie and I are, you know, fairly well along in making a transfer, and she really is running the business at this point. So, I mean, George, you said that figure you put up about a 30% success rate. How many years into it before that goes up a little bit? Like, she's been working with me for 10 years. Is there a little bit higher probability that this will work as time goes on? It's not like just turning it over to somebody.
Yeah, Dave, it's a really good question. I only know that one component of that data point, but I mean, I suspect, I mean, first of all, Addie's been there for 10 years. I mean, she knows what she's getting into at this point. I mean, right, she's gone up and down, she's seen COVID, she knows how hard it is to run the business, to be there and so forth. And she's continuing to volunteer in the sense of, working with you and working on the transfer. I suspect that she's going to have a significantly higher rate of success than, you do hear these stories, right? Where, the 28-year-old son comes in and all of a sudden he's running a $35 million IT business or something. And it's like, okay, that's where
That's not going to work.
that type of statistics is coming from, right?
No. Well, we're at the point where we're negotiating the hard dollars. So a lot of the ideas that you introduced today or reinforced today, the capital. I think my price is going up, so I might want to warn her.
Right, exactly. So, well, what she needs to do is just retain you as a salesperson, and that way you can drive gross profit. So,
Well, yeah, I don't see myself going away. The way we're structuring it, though, I would have no ownership at that point.
right.
So that's the funny thing. So one of the other presenters talked about, and I think it was predominantly when you were selling to a third party. David's transition is in-house. Mine would be to management. We're already at least starting those conversations, but the planning is out there. And so one of the comments that was made was that you have to be prepared as an owner that, the person taking over may not actually want you around. And so how often, I guess the question I have is, if it's an in-house thing, how often do you actually see that happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are in various situations, like typically with a third party, as you indicated, Cindy, a sort of, a buyout time, or sort of an earnout, if you will, is typically stipulated in the contract documents where, we expect you to stay for a year. And if you stay and we hit these numbers, then you earn X, right? That's the definition of an earnout. Usually the expectation is after that year, you're gone and we don't want to see you again. So I think internally, with somebody who's, management, somebody you have a relationship with, I think the key is just for you to have a conversation. Hey, what's going to happen, right? In Q1, do you want me here 100% of the time? In Q2, it's 75, Q3, it's 50, etc. It just kind of slips down to a percentage of 0. Or is it year one, it's 100% as if I never left, but I'm no longer in the owner's seat, if you will, right? I think that those are really just healthy conversations to have and sort of set up an agreement with each other of what does it look like, right? Because I think, it's easy, let's just say hypothetically that, this transition goes unbelievably, well and smoothly and everyone's, high-fiving each other and it's just a great relationship. It's easy for you to stay engaged and for you to stay as long as you want and as long as they want, if it's a healthy relationship. If it's an unhealthy relationship, then it just becomes, a ticking time bomb, right? How quickly can we get to the end of that agreement and I'm gone, right? So the point is that if it's a healthy relationship, you can stay on as long as you want, as long as that person wants you there, right? But I think it's just more about having the conversation up front. What do we think this is going to look like? How long do we think it's going to transition? That type of thing.
I have a question. So it's sort of a two-part question because it's like the success rate of a succession versus third party. I mean, most of these businesses are, and I'm not speaking of us. I don't know. I mean, most of these remodeling businesses are just not sellable at the end of the day. Like they might get acquired per se, if I'm using just splitting hairs and semantics and all this other stuff, like acquired for your infrastructure, your people, your platforms, yada, yada, yada. I'm just acquiring you because I want to grow my business versus somebody coming in and just actually sitting where I'm sitting today. And I'm not talking about transitioning. I got a 10-year-old, so I'm talking 10 to 12 years, right? And at least post-college. So like, what makes it sellable versus not sellable? And I know you went into a lot of this, you know, if you had great net profit and you only had $700,000 in revenue, but you were only making whatever, is it even sellable? Like, what are the numbers where you really start to get to that four? Like, is it $5 million in revenue? Is it 8 figures in revenue? Like, what are kind of the sweet spots? And I'm not asking for free advice. I'm just sort of thinking through my head. Most of these things are not sellable. I've heard peers year after year after year, I want to sell, I want to sell, I want to sell. And then at the end of the day, they can't sell because they got nobody to sell it to.
Right.
And it just goes away.
Yeah. So, you know, as you said, I mean, it's multiple part conversation and it's complicated, but my gut is based off of personal and professional. So personal opinion, but professional data is that businesses in our industry start to become attractive somewhere around 2 to 2.5 million. Because, I mean, frankly, Keith, you and I could walk across the street tomorrow and start $1 million remodeling business in the market we're in DC right now. I mean, you can't even swing a cat without basically walking into 5 homeowners in DC that are looking for a remodeler. So, you know, why would anybody pay for a $700,000 business when they could basically create that revenue in 90 days? Now, I want to make it very clear. I'm not saying that they're creating profitable revenue and that they're going to do a good job of it. I'm just saying that they will generate that revenue that quickly. So once there is a ceiling, you know, around $1 million that most remodelers have to break through, right? That's that first ceiling, you know, of really when the business starts getting, you know, difficult, where you need processes, you need more employees than just yourself, you know, or, you know, a bookkeeper, that type of thing. So usually once you get through that ceiling at $1 million, you start growing, and then you hit that, you know, 2.5 million number, and you can start, you know, becoming attractive because you've broken through that first ceiling. You have processes in place, you have some human capital that has some value, you know, and you're able to drive some of that from that perspective. So.
Okay, so where's the next ceiling after the 2.5?
Yeah, so I mean, usually I see another ceiling in our industry, and Dave, you've been around forever, and Debbie, you might know, you know, pro remodelers without disclosing anything, sort of revenue size. But I suspect you know, some data tells me, Keith, that the next ceiling is about 4 to 5 million, right? You know, sort of that there's another ceiling there that remodelers have to break through. And then from there, you know, it goes 8, 9, 10 million, you know, somewhere in there. Those are the sort of 3 ceilings that I've seen in our business. You know, typically when a homeowner reach out to me and say, oh, you know, I've just been stuck at 7 million for 3 years. I can't seem to get past that. I don't know why, right? You know, okay, well, let's look at your human capital. Let's look at your structure. Let's look at your processes, right? You know, sort of thing. You know, I mean, I don't know if you're familiar, but, you know, Edwards Deming, you know, has this great quote that says, right, the system is designed to produce the results that the system is designed to produce, or something like that. I forget the exact quote, right? The system gets the results that it's designed to produce. The point being is we all build processes for a $3 million company when we're 2.5 million. And then we get there, and that's where that ceiling kicks in again. And we got to break through that ceiling and then rewrite the processes, you know, at a different size, right? But go ahead, Dave.
I would describe it not as ceilings, but just a really big, thick cloud. And, you know, you get to the million level and you go into the cloud. And there's not one thing at any one level. I don't think it's hard to put a price on it. But as you make your systems better and better, and you start looking at them, there's always some way to improve it, or some new person you need to hire that'll make it better. You know, there's always something else to do. And I would think even when you get to 25 million, there's still something that you can do better. And there's always something to reach for there.
Right. I think it's a really great way of describing it, you know,
Yeah.
Dave.
Maybe not a cloud, but that's what it feels like.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, we all know the adage, right? You know, you can grow broke. And I think, you know, if you use that $1 million cloud ceiling, regardless of the term, you know, when we see contractors taking on bigger and bigger jobs, they don't know how to estimate. They don't know their margin, and they basically run out of cash before they can complete the job. They have literally grown broke. That they don't understand cash flow and what it takes to run. You see these, smaller companies that start doing $10,000-$15,000 projects, and then all of a sudden they get a repeat client and they're like, hey, can you do $100,000 project? And the client's like, I had this miserable experience. I mean, the first time I did business with them, they remodeled the bathroom, it was awesome. And then I asked them to do something else, and it was a total disaster because they didn't have the processes, they didn't understand how to estimate, they didn't understand markups, they didn't understand job duration, and they literally grew broke in the middle of the project. And that's why you hear about these rescue projects that are 60% complete because the contractor went out of business, or they got in such a disagreement with each other that the homeowner would no longer basically fund the project because they were concerned about the end product.
Makes
So
sense.
Keith, you just said something earlier, and because we've been in this group together for 3 sessions, right? So
Yeah.
you said sell versus acquire. And so the thing I've been struggling with is I'm not a contractor, I probably should be in an architecture or design or something seminar, but this is the seminar I came to. But as far as my company, there is value to a smaller contractor looking to add design onto staff, so that acquiring could potentially be a value proposition to somebody because we have all the systems and we also understand the systems of the contractors. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense. Exactly. Like, so and Cindy, I just try to tie that back in because basically, let's just call the thresholds 1 million, 3 million, 5 million. Okay. For the sake of this conversation. And wouldn't you agree though, that if you are gonna sell, you're certainly not going to be selling as you're moving between those clouds, right? Because those clouds are going to create less profitability. Am I missing that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, in the sense of, let's say hypothetically, right, we break through cloud 1 and we go out into the marketplace and we acquire talent that will let us build to 2. We're now spending more, and we're spending money as overhead of a $2 million company, but only generating revenue for 1. And so we in this example have hypothetically made the decision as a leadership team, as an ownership team, to make an investment in the organization to help us grow to 2. But the EBITDA for that year while we're growing is going to be less. So to your point, Keith, you're going to want to get up to that $2 million revenue, maintain that to show consistency and profit, and then be able to show a buyer that you're going to sell, right?
Yeah.
And I think Cindy,
So,
I'm sorry, Keith, go ahead.
It's okay. I mean, I get it. I'm maybe it's an offline conversation. And I don't care about this group being transparent. I think everybody probably has a sense of where people are. We're essentially at the 3 number, either just under or just above this year, but the 3-year plan is to get to 5. So I'm willing to accept less profitability during this period, and have for the last 2 years, because I've added hundreds of thousands of dollars in professional director level salaries, like Jenny. Like, she's not a bookkeeper, she's the director of finance and operations, which is why she's on this call.
Right.
Because it's good planning sense. So we're already broken through that first tier. I'm already have a plan for the next one. And so it's really just a matter of, well, if I don't get there in 2 years, now I'm going to be pushing the exit strategy, because you want 3 years at that new number. And like you said, what if you get there and you used a great expression, grow in, well, I don't know what you said, but you basically talked about getting somebody ready for sale, but then they only had to work 10 hours a week and they could still, Jenny, can you start working on my boat? They could still get the boat and the second house paid. Like, why would you leave?
Right. Yeah, so right, so as opposed to, I think what you were referring to, Keith, as opposed to coaching you out, we're gonna coach you up and stay in the business, right? So
Yeah.
the short answer is no, Jenny cannot physically go work on your boat, but she can stroke checks to pay for your boat.
That's
Right.
what I meant. Oh, that's what no, I don't have a boat. I want like a Winnebago camper. I
Right.
want like a little, Sea Ray, I'm
Right.
thinking of all the things I can buy,
Right,
inside the business. And
Yeah.
hopefully Jenny's already on the web looking for some toys.
right.
I'll share.
But Cindy, I think one thing I do want to circle back to is, and you're alluding to this, is that a strategic buyer is willing to pay more for your business than certainly an inside management buyout, right? So to your point, if we found, and I'm literally just hypothetically, a $5 million construction company that's been dabbling in design build, and they don't have to go through all the heartburn and heartaches of basically creating an architecture design team, and they know strategically that they can come and pay you a premium, immediately rebrand as a design build team, even launching off of your brand and your reputation in the marketplace, then they hypothetically, I mean, from an academic case study, should be willing to pay you more as a strategic buyer than if you're just buying, selling to a family member, another team member, that sort of thing, right? So that's where private equity money kicks in and so forth, because that organization can go borrow money paying a premium, but accelerating a design build department 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right?
They can get a return on that immediately.
Yeah, I mean, like literally on day one, you guys are already running profitable projects for them, versus them learning the school of hard knocks and mistakes, and how do you manage artists versus managing a production team, that sort of thing. That has value. I mean, there's no question about it.
Yep. Aha moment.
Yeah, Cindy, I would agree with that. So, I think I mentioned in the second call that I've had a couple of inquiries, but I had a solicitation. And it was mostly because we were not having tremendous profit at the time, net profit. It was just a strategic acquisition for them to grow. If that, right, it was.
Yep.
It was probably I'm guessing it was a $10+ million company.
Gotcha.
Right. And again, in our business, right, people can go out and reproduce the results that we can produce, but maybe they don't have a playbook, maybe they don't have a process, maybe you have human capital or sort of social capital that they want to acquire, right? When maybe you own a part of the marketplace, right, that's just unbelievably difficult to get into, Northwest, and sort of permits and whatever. I mean, and that's having that strategic competitive advantage, right? Owning a piece of the marketplace that is very difficult to get into is what drives a lot of value. And in our industry, that's a little bit more difficult. But I'll tell you, right, in 2007, none of us knew that we needed an iPhone, and yet it very quickly everyone needed one. Well, if you don't know the story, what Steve Jobs did is he went out to the chip makers and he bought 2 years supply of all the chips that were going into phones. So from 2007 to 2009, he owned the market because Samsung and their Galaxy phones and things couldn't keep up with the market demand that he created, because he went out into the marketplace and bought all of the chips to run the phones before he rolled out the iPhone. He knew that was the bottleneck. And then if you couldn't get a hold of the chips, you couldn't make the phones, and he could basically control the market.
Right.
And we all learned, I mean, with cars and everything, I mean, who knew that you could shut down an automobile manufacturer without computer chips? I mean, it's
Or an
unbelievable.
appliance manufacturer.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. So.
It was smart.
Super smart, no doubt. All right.
I miss my pager.
Hey, David, what are you grilling,
Are you
man?
grilling, David? Yeah.
Is it on fire?
No, You've got
First I was
your,
like, he's left the
you got your
business.
tongs, brother.
What are you
I'm
grilling?
grilling filet mignon.
Oh, man, I'll be right over.
That's the only steak I like. All right.
Dave, do you still have a roll of quarters in your truck just so you don't have a flashback or something?
I do have quarters in my truck.
What are you gonna do with them?
Put them in a parking meter.
I carry them too. And for Maryland, we don't need them too much, Virginia.
They only get you 2 minutes though. It's ridiculous.
Right. Any
Good.
other questions?
Yeah. Well, I'll, Debbie, obviously you can wrap up, but, let's give everybody back some time if, if there's no other questions or anything, happy to stay on if need be. And, hopefully, if anybody wants to reach out to me or chat about anything, please know I'm here as a resource, right? I mean, I'm a member of Pro because, my experience at BOA and my passion for our industry, it's the place I like to be and like to help. So if there's anything I can do, I certainly want you guys to know that I'm here as a resource. Just call me, right? Sometimes we just need to talk to somebody who's not in our business, right? It just doesn't, I don't have a horse in the race, right? For any of your businesses, just give me a shout, we talk about stuff, be a sounding board.
Thank you, George.
Thank you,
Thank
George.
you for all your participation and all the energy you've put into this whole workshop. So I hope everyone has enjoyed it. I will get everything out to you, or Angela will. I'll let her know what we need to do and follow up and get you all that information. Thank you
Great.
all for
All right.
attending. And that's a
Thank you
wrap.
guys for all of you for making this an enjoyable session to come back to.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy. See you, David.
Thank you.
All right, thanks,
See you
team.
later.
Have a
Thank
good
you,
night.
George.
Take care.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if I can stop recording.